women go through menopause, men go through their own version, right? Emotionally, we can start questioning like, am I doing anything what am I doing for the next generation, or do I feel stagnated? Resilience is not about, okay, let's just move on tomorrow. Yeah, I think resilience is about looking inwards to say, what can I learn from this? And what is the purpose in this setback or change or disappointment? There's a lesson there. And then looking at it to say, how can I use my lesson to actually make the next project better, the next move better, or even just making a difference to the people around me? So resilience has a reflective part to it. So I would think that that's sort of how we as leaders need to develop and practice, this ability to reflect, contain ourselves, and therefore we are able to then nourish and guide others.
Okay, so welcome, Wendy, to the My Working Title podcast. We are here to inspire and empower people to actively design your careers, and it's amazing to have you. So welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So everybody, I'll do a quick intro of Wendy. So Wendy has 20 years of experience as an educator for personal transformation, applying psychology to help leaders and teams build resilience and better performance. There's quite a lot, and she'll be able to share more later. So she was a school psychologist at Raffles Institution, and she left to be the founder of what she's doing now, running now, One Inspiration. So she's the affiliate with global management consulting firm McKinsey. And she's developed many leaders in Singapore Armed Forces, multinational companies, healthcare institutions, and more. And guess what? She's written 23 books on multiple intelligence and resilience. I don't know how she did that. And she's also the mother of 4 grown-up kids. So Wendy is awesome. I've been to her place to do like visioning and wrapping up the year. It's always so heartfelt and so heartwarming. So we really want to hear from her. So Wendy, anything to add to your amazing intro already?
Well, I think given you would also like to talk about career, I think I have, it's always changed careers or changed roles over the last 30 years with the core that is psychology, right? And so I'm happy to talk about, what created those changes and how I did it as well.
Nice. Yeah, we definitely hear more of that from you. So, also, I just wanted to just kick us off with a question. So, you are an expert in education and psychology, right? So, and I know you've had a very colorful personal journey, one that is really inspiring. How did this knowledge in education and psychology help you in your own journey?
Mm. Well, I think definitely when I was 29, I actually got retrenched and I became a single mom, right? And so, from being a very clever, academically successful student in the past to be facing my own setbacks and challenges, I realized that if I don't practice what I preach, then I will just spiral down. And so I started to think about what's important to me. I started to practice shifting my focus from what I don't have and the problems I have to actually what's possible for me and what I do have. I do have a great degree, I have done research, I have the skills, and I live in Singapore. And so I thought, okay, what can I do with what I have in terms of my expertise, in terms of my interest? And so that helped me, find a new job. And that was the one that became the school psychologist of Raffles. Personally, I also apply that instead of looking at being, poor me, single mom, no job, to actually, it's possible for me to raise my 3 children up to be resilient and responsible and caring. So I think the power of the mind is really important, right? What we focus on will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And if I focus on the lack, the setback and all, I would have gone depression and I'll spiral down. And I was beginning to feel that. And so I said, okay, I can't spiral down. I can't go, you know, any more darker. I really need to pull myself up. I have 3 kids, and so I think that's just being able to apply what I've learned as a psychology student to my real life. And I think the good thing about that is then it got me to become a more empathetic psychologist when I walk into RI. That instead of just being, oh, I'm so clever, I did all this research, to actually go, okay, what it feels like to be in pain and to deal with it, and then still be able to perform, because I still need to wake up in the morning and go to school and take care of the mental health, well-being, and performance of 1,800 um, students. So yeah, so I think it did help me. Of course, family, faith, self-care, self-nourishing helped as well. And I think that's also part of what psychological research shows, right? That if we go through a difficult time, don't go alone. Reach out for support, take care of yourself, allow people to support in whatever spiritual practice you can, so that I believe that there's something bigger than what I'm going through. What I'm going through is going to be only temporary, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that piece. That is definitely identify the, oh, I'm so smart and clever, to the, oh, suffering, and then feeling a lot for people. I'm going through that at this moment. So interesting midlife passage for me. Uh, yeah. So on that note, I also reference back to you sharing about your career transitions. Could you just walk us through maybe a specific period of time where you were transitioning in your career, and how, what are some of the things that you have felt, and how you got through that situation? Yeah.
Okay, so there is a few transition, right? So I think from grad school to coming back to Singapore is a huge transition. I was 24, 25, um, and full of naive, bright ideas, like, oh, I'm going to save Singapore from stress, to the reality of working as a young adult, and then having children, right? Getting married, having children really quickly. I was one of those like graduate women with 3 children before 30. The government loved me. So becoming a very young single mom is definitely a transition. Then and and I think I'm very good at parenting. And so maybe the psychology and education helped me, because I was able to know how to raise my children and start a career, right? So the parenting bit is like, okay, I've got experience working with kids since I was 16. So that was the easy part. And I think that is something that when women and men become parents, that could be a transiting role that can be quite challenging. How to become a working parent, right? You were a career person and then now you have kids. How do you integrate that, right? And how do you deal with that change? And I think that's one that people might want to recognize and acknowledge, that it is a transition, right? What happens in life impacts the career. And so that's one. And I think I've mentioned just now the transition from, being in a corporate uh, organization leadership at 29 to becoming a school psychologist, which is like an individual contributor, and actually using my psychology a lot more directly with youths was one transition. And then becoming a single mom. So then become a single mom working. So I was like, okay, that was like, okay. So I had to deal again with the life setbacks while continue to perform in my career, right? There was no other, it wasn't like, oh, I have another income, therefore I don't need to work. But it was really like, it's up to me to make things work. So that transition means relying on what I've studied before, plus keep studying, because when I'm in RI, I really needed to apply what I've learned into the lives of these students and their parents, right? Then the next transition would be in 2003, when I decided to leave RI to start up my own business, my own practice. And that went from a very secure job, steady income, bonus came when they all score A's, to the, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Right. And that took courage. And I think took, maybe I was so naive that I just thought, oh, I just do this. Right. And so that was a big transition when I was 33. And actually, over the last 21 years running One Inspiration, there's a lot of different transitions as well. Myself as an entrepreneur, leader, still working mom, to what kind of roles do I play in my own company? What kind of skills do I want to do? So in the last 21 years, I've written, I have been on radio, I have written for the columns, so it's not just one job. Actually, I have, I think, five jobs within the last 21 years, right? And I think one common thread would be constantly looking at what am I good at and how can I use what I'm good at in my career, and then to also think about what I'm passionate about. And so there's a little Venn diagram, right? What I'm good at, what I'm interested in, what's my life circumstances, and then make choices along the way.
Oh, that's a lot of transitions, and I love you talking about that because one of the things I've been hearing about is Singaporeans are not that great at transitions or grief per se. Even organizations, we're like, oh, we just finished this project that didn't work and failed. Okay, thanks. Let's move on tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I think so. Resilience is not about okay, let's move on tomorrow. Yeah, I think resilience is about looking inwards to say, what can I learn from this? And what is the purpose in this setback or change or disappointment? There's a lesson there. And then looking at it to say, how can I use my lesson to actually make the next project better, the next move better, or even just making a difference to the people around me? So resilience has a reflective part to it. And actually, I do teach in organizations the Bridges model of transition because we need to recognize that something ended, grieve through it, right? And it's not about like just crying. I mean, depending on the circumstance, we still just need to recognize that I'm shocked, I'm feeling a bit ambivalent in the situation. I have all this uncertainty, it's frustrating. Just being able to name the emotions so that we don't carry that baggage unconsciously into the next project or next move. So actually, grieving is really part of transition.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, we also love the Bridges transitions model. I always find it very funny that his name is Bridges.
Yeah, I know, right? And then the transition is this way, so it's like bridge transition.
Yeah, we've been sharing that with one of the clients I've been working with that's going through a lot of changes. So as we know in Singapore, things are, getting very, very fast paced and more changes are coming with Trump and I don't know what else is happening, war and all that. So there is a research has shown, or rather surveys have also shown that, one in three young people in Singapore aged between 15 to 35 have experienced severe or extremely severe symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress. I'm also keen to find out the older folks like us, what is the mental health? I have a guess that it has also been sort of on the decline. So just curious with this whole what you mentioned, you are like a multi hyphenate, people are going into portfolio careers. There's going to be a lot more changes, and at a rate perhaps we can't even that is a bit too much for us. So, what are some of your thoughts on that, and what have you been sharing with the organizations that you've been consulting with?
I always look at what is within my control and influence, right? So I would say, what can I do within my team, my family, my community, my country, and whatever countries I'm sent to, and the people I work with. So maybe I'm also a bit like, again, being very naive and optimistic. I think no matter what setbacks I've gone, I've not lost that, right? So I would say I actually create like a little bubble, really, because once I create a little safe bubble of grace and rest and courage and wisdom, I want to bring that bubble to whoever I go to, right? Whether it's an organization, a community, a youth group. And I said, look, it's safe here. Let's talk about what's important to you, right? I can't do anything about the war or whatever's going on, but I can do something about what's going on with me and with people around me, and they can do something about themselves and the people around them, the business that they're leading, the people they're leading. We can do something about those methods, right? And so I think I want people to focus on that, because if we give up hope, if we give up like, oh, the world is so terrible, and then everybody gets into this state of panic, which I don't think is very useful, right? And I think if we all can learn to have a little bit of peace and quiet and rest, then we can actually create those relationships and the results that are really important to us.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. So, I've been also hearing things like developing a non anxious presence so that you don't emit your own anxiety to other people as leaders and managers and things like that, right? And also family and all that. I'm just curious, right? So, you talked about creating a safe bubble, you're creating a safe space where people can be safe. How do you practically do that for yourself and your team?
Yeah, also in psychology we call it a container, right? It's almost like if we look at how parents do it, the parents were able to create a container, right, for the kids to learn, right, and explore and feel safe that if they fall down, they can get up and and so in that way, organization leaders can also think about creating that container. And I think as leaders too, I like how you said the non-anxious presence. I would like to just presence, right? That I create this container, and for me, I may have, anxiety about this or questions about this. I need to also create that container within myself, so I don't bring that and affect others and my team or even my clients. I need to deal with it myself, and then be able to talk about it at the right time, right? So I would think that that's sort of how we as leaders need to develop and practice, this ability to reflect, contain ourselves, and therefore we are able to then nourish and guide others.
Yeah, so that's a really beautiful picture of, self-nourishment, self-care, and so that we can give out. So I'm also hearing that executive coaching for leaders are on a rise. So what are some, I mean, besides executive coaching or what goes on in coaching, maybe you can unpack that a little bit more for what I call the inner work sometimes for the leaders and managers, or even just I think nowadays the young people are a lot more savvy than at least me. They are really into this, right? So how can one person, in this creating that safe bubble, and what are some of the internal frameworks or internal whatever advice you have for us to be even more resilient?
For the coach or for the coach?
Coachy, or
Okay.
maybe the coach too. Yes,
Okay.
both.
Everyone.
Yes.
Well, I think definitely one is I mentioned just now reflection, right? I still journal almost every day. Okay. I would think that maybe only about 10% of my days I don't journal for whatever reason, tired, traveling. But I do bring a journal wherever I go. And I still do writing because I think it just helps me to just slow down and reflect on what am I feeling, what's going on. And that's part of how I contain myself. Like if something's going on in my head and I'm having conversations with myself, it's better to like put it onto a piece of paper, right? At least I can refer to it or at least it's like expressed out. So I know it sounds like so old school, but I still encourage executives, let's say in the business of life, just pause and reflect. Yeah. And if you can, you capture it. I think the other one is relationships. Being able to know who you can turn to when things get tough, right? Have those people as part of your support network. Yeah. Mm. And then when people are going through changes and difficulties, I ask people to name their emotions. What's really going on inside. We teach the iceberg. So we want people to go, what are my thoughts that are helping? What are my thoughts that's not helping? What are the feelings that I'm having? What am I anxious about? What am I angry about? What am I excited about? So being able to name what you want to tame and also name what you want to create. I ask people to look at their needs. Now what's met, what's not met. I ask people to look at their fears. What are you afraid of, And being in that safe and vulnerable and authentic space, people can at least reveal it and know that they're not being judged. And when they receive from a coach what we call unconditional positive regard. It's actually a word we use in therapy, right? Then they feel like, oh, it's okay for me to say things, experiment things without being judged and criticized. Then people will start to learn, to experiment, to change. And with that, they will grow that sense of worthiness. They will grow their courage and also take steps towards the goals that they want to achieve. Right? So I think there's like step by step, many different techniques that I use. I would also use, because I'm trained in like family constellation and my work before, I look a lot like family relations in my research work before. So to me, the family of origin is also very important. So not all coaches do that because not all coaches are trained, but because of my background in psychology and my research in family relations, I know that I can ask those questions and I can help people reconcile um, what might be the past with what's going on in the future, at the present, help to let go of some of the burdens, right, and what we call emotional baggage, so people are freer to then move forward. So that's part of resilience, right? Resilience is not like you just put on everything into your backpack and keep tahan in Singapore language, and then continue to climb that mountain. No, sometimes you got to stop and say, actually, what's in my bag? What is really not useful anymore? Maybe it was useful 10 years ago, it's no longer useful. Or maybe it wasn't even useful 20 years ago, but you're still carrying it. So can you please unpack? Can you please declutter your own baggage and just carry what is useful now? And give yourself enough space in that bag to add more things in rather than just dragging years and years of baggage along. That doesn't help you. And people burn out, right? They do why? Because they're tired of dragging their emotional baggage, through up and down. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I actually am in that process of that, going through different interventions and different sessions, and just really like I find it in midlife, certain structures that have served me don't seem to serve me anymore. And I'm
Mm.
re-questioning certain things, and even like my strengths have brought me so far, but at the same time some weaknesses have caught up, so how do I navigate it? And I totally understand and hear what you're saying about just traveling lighter. So I just
Yes, traveling
went
lighter.
for
Yeah,
a
yeah.
silent retreat that day, and the theme was traveling lighter. Yeah.
Mm.
So on that note, I think you brought up a point on burnout, and I just wanted to zoom in on that a little bit more, because we are hearing that a lot more, and people are a little bit more courageous in taking sabbaticals, career breaks. Thankfully, the system is a little bit kinder now. Not fully, ageism is still there and all that. But what are some of your thoughts on the psychological impacts of burnout on career development, and how have you maybe helped some people to overcome that and move forward?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, when people talk about burnout, right, they are experiencing like a sense of lethargy or like, what's the point of this? And if they still need to drag themselves to work because everyone needs to be paid, unless they've got big savings or something. But, still need to get paid. They just go through the motion. It's almost like, I'm just doing this because I got to. So emotionally, it's very tiring. Performance wise, it can also be dipping. And not everybody can say afford to take a sabbatical. So, what I would actually ask people, right, is to notice the sign before you actually burn out. So that's why the pausing to say, how's my week been? Like if every week people do a bit of a mental well-being check-in, like, how's my week? And I've been introducing the Palma Plus model to people and just pause and says, how much have I had positive emotions this week? How much is my activity fully engaged? Am I doing things I enjoy? And how's my relationships going at work, at home? What's meaningful? Do I find things meaningful this week? What have I done well this week? Like just acknowledging even small accomplishments. I think where people can, and I'm beginning to start to share this more and more with organizations and leaders to say, mental well-being is in your hands, is your responsibility. So there's one, right, the individual, and then there's the organization. And so individually, we can all do that whole check-in ourselves. If we have a team, I check in with my team, and say, how's the week? And if things are there are things that can be happening that causes distress, or questioning purpose, then pause and address it. It's almost like if you have a cold and you don't do something, you don't rest, and then later on it becomes a bigger problem, right? And so I would ask people like really just spend that a bit of time. It doesn't even have to be a whole hour, but just to pause and say what's going on. Then you can address it before it escalates. Then if you look at each part, I also help people to go, well, let's look at what is your purpose now. And if you can carry that purpose into your activities in your career, then there's a bit of that, there's a purpose instead of just doing Excel spreadsheet or, like, and even when we do trainings or facilitation, it can also come a point of what's the point, right? And so my purpose is inspiring resilience. And so even if I'm flying around the world, I've jet lag, I wake up and I go, okay, I'm walking into that room. How am I inspiring resilience today? And that gives me that energy and that focus. And it's not always a rah-rah energy, it can be very quiet energy. So I ask others to do that too, because that helps to keep us shining, not burning, right? Yeah.
I love that quote, shining, not burning. Yeah. So we are not like, oh, the candle are like no more oil already, right?
Yeah, and that's why we need to add the oil, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's not heroic now to say, oh, I only sleep 2 hours, and I'm like burning with the, midnight oil or like candles or both. And I'm like, that's nothing to be boasting about. That's like, don't, I mean, I boast about, oh, I have 7 hours of sleep.
Yeah, this is the new
Oh,
the
right?
new
I
yeah.
look at, oh.
Yeah. You definitely don't look your age. Way more.
That's actually my credibility. I stand in front of like a group of leaders and I tell them I'm 54 and they go, no. And I said, you practice what I teach you, okay?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you were sharing, I picked up a few points. One is the whole sense of purpose that you talked about, right? And it's that sometimes when we talk to different people, they're like, how I find my purpose, So it can sound very meta and it sounds very scary because you're like, wow, where to find my purpose? Do you have any like, light posts or like in lighthouses, guiding posts for people to reflect on their purpose or find their purpose in that sense?
There's a process I learned in this program called Authentic Lives, and actually they still run it, and it's actually run by volunteers. So if you're interested, look at Authentic Lives. And there's a process where we look at what are our happy moments in life, and then they actually give us a list of verbs and a list of nouns to choose what resonate with us. And by being able to pick like I picked inspiring and I picked resilience, and I thought, oh yeah, that that kind of sums up, what my purpose is, right? So it's amazing, and I've done this with adults. I've even used it with teenagers, and in that whole process, there's a sense of like, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If you can come over to my house and I'll do it.
Sure, anytime. Yeah. So yeah, thanks so much for that because I find that sometimes when people feel very lost, we talk about this in a vacuum. We're like, come find your purpose. Then we're like, huh? How?
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
need something concrete as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is really helpful. We'll put the link in the show notes for those who are interested. The other thing that I picked up when you were sharing was the organization's responsibility for well-being. So it is yes, the individuals can do all they can, reflect, look at relationships, etc. What can organizations do more or do less of?
If I may, I also work with a company in Australia called Flourish DX, and I think they do wonderful work with organizations in taking care of the psychosocial health and safety at the workplace. It's very based on psychology, statistics, research, and their stand. And when I work with them, I've said, okay, I'll stand. Is also the organization's responsibility to ensure that the workplace is psychosocially healthy and safe. And some of the things, of course, you can say, oh, we run programs, which we do. Like I run programs in Singapore where we talk about mental well-being, resilience. I give talks. I do 2-day programs. I embed resilience and psychological models into leadership programs. So we can do that. It's like teaching, right? And people being more aware and that the individuals go off and practice. Organizationally, we should also look at how the workplace design. For example, if the workplace design has got lots of tasks that's cognitively very demanding, emotionally very demanding, if there's a lot of uncertainty, if the managers are not supportive, if people find, you know, long work hours, and so there are lots of things also in the organizations that we must look at. And when we know that these are not scoring very well, right, then is the organizations willing to say, actually, yeah, how can we redesign task and work so that cognitively it's not as demanding? Like maybe there's some ways to change task and procedures so it can become very concrete and practical. So it's not just everybody sit around and breathe, which is important, but breathing can get you that far. But if they after they breathe, meditate, they come back and the work is still cognitively and emotionally demanding, then it's almost like you try to solve something, but that thing is still existing. So I think organizations can do more at doing that as well, to look at how's the workplace and what's the work design like, and what can we change, like for example healthcare with shift work and all that. No matter how much cookies we bring to them and fruit basket, if they don't do anything about work design, it's still going to be there, right? Yeah, so I think I'm just going to put it out there that organization leaders listening to this, think about how are you redesigning workflow and how teams are working so that it helps people to be mentally better.
Yeah, that's a very, very astute call for that. We do here, especially healthcare, there's a lot of burnout. We've been working with some of the hospitals, and it's also the whole part that we are also feeling a bit encouraged. I'm seeing more organization design development teams in hospitals that are helping. So just curious, right? Like you said, you work with Flourish DX and all that. Is there like a checklist or diagnostics that,
Yes, yes.
yeah?
In fact, when they work with, when they go into a client, there is, it's all in an app, right? So individuals will actually be asked something as anonymous. So all the items there are statistically sound, right? And so by actually employees completing those surveys, then in the dashboard, we actually see the results. And if you then can decide what intervention. Sometimes we just do intervention for say, no, but you actually want to know, like a proper study, the pre and the post, right? What really you want to change, And then if after that, like 6 months later, you can give the same items, right? And then you can see whether the interventions are working. Yeah, so and in Australia, they have just passed regulations that um, organizations must take a look at psychosocial health and safety, right? And Singapore is still quite far behind. We're still just doing well-being talks. So I'm actually studying what's going on in Australia, right? And say be ready so that we can implement it, and not just like in mining or healthcare, but I think we don't have like mining and all resource, but we have other kinds of workplace. Even I think banking could look at psychosocial health and safety, right? So I think I'm just studying what's going on in Australia and saying, okay, what can we do here?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think there's also a fear, right, of like if I have too much well-being, then the performance will drop. But I think the contrary is different, right? Like the better the well-being, the better the performance. So I think leaders probably need to get a hold of that and really find out practically what they can do. And I think with the research, it will also give them a bit more confidence that, like this intervention is more helpful than a yoga talk or or one of those, yeah, everybody today is wellness day.
Yeah, you cannot just do like one day, 1 week, a year kind of thing. You kind of like need it embedded, yeah, into different processes, different team, activities. Looking at, as I said, the work design, right? Is it helpful? Can it be done with less steps? Get the younger generation to come and redesign things. It could be like we can do it in 5 steps that we thought we needed 20, right? So
Yeah, they'll
yeah,
probably ask ChatGPT too.
that's right. Be more effective. And I think for us, a little bit older, be open to going, okay, let's accept these recommendations and changes. Yeah. And don't go, oh, I used to be done this way. That sounds so like auntie, right? Just like, no, okay, let us take a look and let's, play with this and let's see how it goes. Let's see how the new design could work.
Yeah, so like you were talking about young people, I think the emotional literacy is much better for them. Yeah.
Very much
So
better.
I just
Yeah.
also wanted to contrast to something, a topic close to your heart also, which is aging. So, like there is this young generation, more emotional literate, and then you have these aunties, and sometimes you're like, huh, what is this? And then, of course,
Yeah.
Singapore is moving into, they call it, I don't quite like the term silver tsunami because it just sounds terrible. But in the
Oh,
aging space, yeah,
okay.
I like the word proactive aging or modern elders, a little bit better. So how, with Singapore moving through different things and careers and aging, so what are some of your thoughts on that since you are very passionate about aging? The last
I'm a
week.
young, I'm a young senior, not senior yet.
I'm getting there. Soon, soon.
Okay, so those of you who are not listening from in Singapore, young senior in Singapore is anyone born before 1973, right? To, I don't know, 1965 or something. But anyway, okay, aging. Yeah, as I grow older, my clientele's become older too, right? So I feel that with age, other things are happening to our bodies, right? Women go through menopause, men go through their own version, right? Emotionally, we can start questioning like, am I doing anything for what am I doing for the next generation, or do I feel stagnated? So Erickson calls it the generativity versus stagnation crisis. And as we even grow older, Erickson says it's like ego integrity versus despair. Have I lived my life well? Am I going to die in despair? Right. So I think once we moved into like 45 onwards, those are the kind of psychosocial crisis that we go through. And lay people were saying midlife crisis. Psychology, we look at it as generativity versus stagnation, right? What am I doing with my life? Have I lived it in a way that I am making a difference to the next generation. And so if someone has been mentoring or doing something or have kids and they can see their kids are growing up, well enough, okay, there's a sense of like I'm generative, right? If not, then they will go like, I feel stuck in my career, stuck in my life, that's stagnation. And so we can definitely help people in midlife to be more reflective about this stage. And actually, recently in a hospital, they asked me to do a workshop on leading multi-generational teams. And in addition to just presenting some research on why and how the different generations think and communicate, I actually brought in the psychological theory of Erickson so people can understand that, yeah, in our early 20s there's the whole identity and role confusion thing, then there's the intimacy versus isolation, and then midlife is other two things, right? So I think it helps people to then go, oh, where am I? And that is not I'm abnormal, that I'm questioning my life, what's wrong with me, but actually to go, actually it's very part of my psychological growth, and what can I do about it now? So I foresee that if people are interested, then I could be talking more about this and helping people to use this framework to reflect about their lives. Because I definitely want people to be more generative and live with ego integrity rather than feel stagnated and despair. Right? So we can all grow up together like that.
Nice.
Grow up. I didn't say grow old. I said grow up.
Yes, yes, yeah, definitely. I am reading a book called Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Older? And it talks about, are you growing older or are you getting older? Yeah.
Oh, oh,
And it's
that's a
very
good.
fascinating. It's written by a philosopher and a doctor, and it was a very good combination of things. I'm definitely going through my midlife, I don't know what you call it, crisis, chrysalis. Everybody calls it different things, but it is a very fascinating passage of growth, and as we move into the aging.
Yeah, but I'm very excited, like I'm 54, I have an empty nest, and I'm like, and her husband and I are talking about, oh, what's next, what do I do? And also, I think if people are in relationships with the partner or even with best friends or friends, just make it all normal to say, hey, in 2 years, what will be exciting? And I think we need that kind of like something to look forward to that we can start creating now, or else it can be very like sad to go, "Oh, my kids have grown up, they're in all their 20s and their life, so those who are parents face the empty nest, right? And then how do you adjust? I grieve like crazy, okay, like, oh, my kids are grown up, to yeah, they've grown up, right? So I think we all have all these changes that's coming up, yeah.
Yeah, so thanks, Penny, so much for sharing your life experience and all the frameworks and checklists and things that for us to think about. I really appreciate our conversation about, through the passage of time, through the passage of life, through different transitions and how we can accept it, grieve through it, acknowledge it, allow it to, be a part of us. At the same time, figuring out handles to make things better for ourselves and other people. So as we end off this session, I wanted to ask you any other burning things you want to share with people, any burning thoughts that you really need to get out of your system,
Yes, okay, may have a lot of burning thoughts. I just
or like not shining thoughts, shining, not burning, shining.
shining thoughts, shining thoughts. After you said all that, the grieving, I think we also need to learn how to celebrate and celebrate the small things. Celebrate the dinner we had last night. Celebrate that I went to the gym. Celebrate, right? Because we need that kind of acknowledgement as well, and appreciate what we've got. In the life with all kinds of ups and downs. Just learn to pause and also celebrate yourself. And just celebrate with other people too.
Yeah, so we should have more mini parties,
Yeah.
mini pats on our backs, and yeah, just acknowledging that, yeah, well, life can be hard, but life can be full of little joys, little, things that make us feel joyful, happy, purposeful, meaningful, and all that we really long for. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
thank you very much, Wendy, for being on the show, and we look forward to this podcast being such a blessing to so many people out there.
Thank you for having me.